Good afternoon, good evening, whoever is there. This is This is not legal advice. And JR, hi JR.
Hey, everybody.
We're here to talk about kind of what's going on. We're going to talk about Doge because JR spent a ton of time on Doge. Doge being the Department of Government
Efficiency.
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 But then somebody, I think I was looking at some Congress people who are going to be involved, because I guess there has to be Congress people involved to give the appearance of that they don't have authority. They called it something else. They
Right.
used same initials, but they called it wasn't Department of Government Efficiency. They deleted the department part because they thought probably not smart if you're claiming you're not a department to call yourself a
Well,
department.
we get right. And that's kind of what you and I were literally just talking about. We'll talk about what it's not going to be, because I think that's easier to assess. I just want to let you know, Bitcoin went down $4 since the time we've talked.
Yeah. So what JR suggested, and I agree, is
Oh,
that we're gonna what JR suggested, and I'm still contemplating if we're gonna do it, is we're gonna stay on until Bitcoin hits 100,000. If that takes 3 hours, that's great. If it happens to
oh
take
man, it's down for the day now, $13.
if it happens to take 3 months, then that's 3 months. That's the way it
And
goes. And
financial disclaimer, I don't have Bitcoin. I don't even know how to fucking buy the shit, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah. By the way, this is not any kind of advice, legal or otherwise, not financial advice, just opinions and entertainment and nonsense. We decided we were going to talk about this topic last week, but we didn't get a chance to because the other topics were so scintillating, we never got around to it. So we're going to talk about Doge, and I'm going to also throw out a little GTII just so I bring you up to speed, since of course I had a communication. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed because I think on last week I said I was going to have a communications, and I can tell you what I asked about it. And we're going to talk about whether Bitcoin's going to hit 100,000 before the end of this live stream. Just to keep it fair and straight, it's now 98,453 currently. But do you have anything to say besides before I say my stupid things?
I did get a lot of questions on GTII this week, and I
What
kept
kind of
deferring
questions?
people.
What kind
Just
of questions?
what's going on, what's the latest, that just very generic stuff. And I kept deferring people back to the previous live stream. So if you do have questions about the latest with GTII, and obviously Richard has more up-to-date news, but just go back and watch that live stream. It was about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We read through the receiver's report. It was very enlightening. We had fun with it, but take a watch. So
Yeah, we
that's
probably
it.
went through things. And if you have questions after that, then we're happy to answer them also. Besides that, because obviously we don't answer everything and we can't anticipate everybody's question. And just to summarize, I wrote this on X, the receiver, this is my interpretation. The receiver believes there were shenanigans and is now seeking the return of some monies and securities, and is trying to complete the necessary audit and get it tradable. That's kind of a summary. And there have been two reports, and there will be another report probably the beginning of January. And obviously, when we get that report, we will go over it. That last report was 53 pages long, so it was quite lengthy. And I'm going to reference that in a little later about what I asked for. Yes, sir.
I posted a link to it if
Oh,
people
great.
want to go and take a read for
Yes,
themselves. They can.
it's really invigorating. And but it creates, obviously, if you weren't concerned about what was going on there before, when you read that entirety, you will be very concerned about what went on. JR, because JR hadn't seen it or hadn't read it until we were doing it, and we're going through it, and he's like, you
Yeah,
were surprised, right?
you're being far too diplomatic. I call it, like I say, it was a fucking shit show. It really was.
But it was surprising the extent. Weren't you kind of surprised at the extent?
I was really surprised to the extent, because you and I recall when we started talking about GTI, the one thing we were always concerned about was kind of the lack of movement on business. So I don't think you and I were anticipating that level of holy crap, what the hell's going on here? I know you had thought it and were trying to kind of sway me towards that in January and February, and I was just too bogged down with other stuff uh, to really dig in and kind of put it all together with you. But you had figured it out very early on. But I don't even think you realized how bad it was.
No. I just kind of, again, it just smelled, again, like when you do something
Right.
long enough, you smell it and you don't know exactly, but usually something will turn up. And this is for everybody because this includes the attorneys that are representing us and, obviously the receiver's attorney and the receiver. I think everybody was kind of surprised because it went beyond whatever everybody expected that would have gone on there. There was enough questionable activity. Again, some of it may be explainable, but a lot of it looks really suspect, just to be honest. And that report gives a little bit of more information. I think it was today. I think the receiver, at least it was scheduled. The receiver was going to get a hold of TD to get the money that was remaining in the account. I think the amount was like 150,000 or so, 151,000. And I think I may be wrong about the date, but I thought it was the 21st of November. That was the day that that was going to happen. There was more, just to kind of refresh. There was about $1 million in that account. According to the report of the receiver, there was $1 million, slightly over that, January of 2024. And as of now, there's about $150,000. So what happened to that other $850,000 based upon, I don't think much could have occurred during that time frame, because I know I got involved with them in February at latest. So they were kind of under the gun. And if they were doing anything that was really significant, for example, if they were, I think, if they had signed a new letter of intent or something and they were engaged, they would have told us. And if they were engaged in due diligence and hired all kinds of auditors and accountants, we would have known that. The only thing we know about is they had to get rid of their existing auditor who, ended up being bad. And they hired the new auditor, but that's not $850,000 either. So hard to understand where it went, but maybe there's an explanation. But I believe the receiver is obtaining whatever's left over, and I might as well deal with it now since I'm talking about it. So I kind of I reached out to the receiver, counsel, etc., and after looking at the report, and I'm not going to go through everything that in other words, I'm not going to look at every paragraph of the report and say, do this, do that. I was just making suggestions or offering my things that stood out to me. One of the items was the TD account and the 151,000 to see what the status of that is. The other thing was that company, that holding company that had $1.63 million, and there was a trustee, and then he was no longer a trustee. I suggested that they take immediate action against that entity to the extent they can. I think the entity is not so obviously GTII is located in Nevada, but this entity I don't think was in Nevada. But I encouraged them to go pursue this aggressively. I suggested that they pursue there. If you recall, we talked about a $2 million transaction involving the profit sharing plan, trades relating to that. And apparently, according to the report, at least, it said that Markowitz had gotten $200,000 out of it and Reichman had gotten $1.8 million. So if that ends up being correct, that's what the receiver said. So if that ends up being correct, I think that has to be pursued. And any shares that those people own, and there's reference to 14 million shares to a Todd Chisholm, who I believe was an officer and director. And I suggested maybe you should pursue somebody like that, maybe who might have acquired shares, or certainly investigate that, although they would probably do that anyway. And the other is the reference to the other Reichman, and does that person have 8 million shares or not? And should they? And what happened to real property and whatever? So I threw that all out. Oh, and I also said, and I don't know if this is possible, I didn't, because I'm not familiar with the law in Nevada, but I said, if possible, wouldn't it be cool if you can get an asset freeze because you claimed that all the assets that they had were from ill-gotten gains, and you have obviously the reports of the receiver establish to some degree a claim of that. So anyway, I thought that would be interesting if you got an asset freeze, because if the people couldn't get access to their capital, it might make it difficult for them to defend these actions also. And would put them in a different position. It would take, take leverage away from them. Again, I don't know if that's possible. In California, would I try something? I certainly would. I'd probably threaten something like that I would try to pursue it, just to add some leverage to it. I don't know. But anyway, I threw that out to that today. So they may, my impression is I may not get direct answers to any of these because the receiver, for example, works for the court, not for me. He doesn't really have any duty to me. His duty is owed to the court. The court is trying to make sure that it is watching out for GTII and the shareholders.
Right.
And so he has no real obligation to me. But I figured if I threw these points out to enough people, they would be considered. And if any of them had validity, and I know at least a couple in there, I would certainly recommend at least following up, that they would do it. So that was the purpose of that. So I expect maybe we'll see if in the next report, maybe some of these items might be addressed in the next report. We shall see. But that happened today. And so everybody's aware of that and they're working on it, and we can go from there. I didn't do my jokes, and last week, at least one person, I think there was one person who asked about it. I apologize. 3 of these are not mine.
No, wait, I want to tell you a story. So a guy on Twitter connected with me, and it turns out this was months ago. He's from my hometown. In fact, his sister, I didn't know him, but I knew his sister. They grew up right down the street from me. And he recently moved to Arizona. He DM'd me just saying, "Hey, how are you doing, man? Blah, 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 blah. It's been a number of years." And again, I said, I felt bad because I didn't actually remember him, but I remembered his sister and his mom and dad. Honestly, they lived like 10 houses down from my mom's house. So he called, reached out to me. We just followed up and checked in. He said, "Oh, I just want to let you know, I love your guys' live stream. I saw you're on tonight." He's like, "But Richard's fucking jokes are awful."
Oh, okay. Right. I appreciate that. It's too bad you didn't tell me before.
I said, but it's too late to stop it now.
Yeah. Cryptocurrencies, this is timely. Cryptocurrencies are making sense today.
Come on, man. It's bad.
Dogecoin, since we're going to talk about Doge, Dogecoin is the pet project of the crypto world. Doge, pet. And last but not least of these my jokes, I tried to explain the concept of Bitcoin mining to my cat, but she just didn't dig it.
Oh, and that's all, dude.
I got one more. This is a thinking man's joke. This is mine. I take credit.
Okay, go. Have at it.
All right. What's the definition of fire hose?
I don't know.
Someone who likes the company of firemen.
Did you make that up?
I did.
That's fucking terrible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, why don't you tell me what you know about Doge?
Elon Musk is going to be the head. I think it's easier to talk about what it's not going to be.
Well, I think one of the goals was to reduce the federal budget by $2 trillion a year. I think that's it, because I don't know if that ultimately gets rid of the national debt or it reduces the national debt, but it probably reduces the increase of the national debt, and maybe it reduces the interest cost. But that's one element. And I think that also suggests that they will be cutting employees or departments. And I heard something today on Meet Kevin. Do you know who Meet Kevin is?
No.
Oh. Meet Kevin's like a financial guy. He's got a big YouTube following. And he was railing about it, but kind of not really relevant besides that. But if you want to talk about it tomorrow, well, call me up. But the idea was just to cut the number of employees, and then you could either give them a package to leave, or whatever.
Well,
So go on.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. It's definitely government bloated, squared. We know that. I think how they, it could be, look, this could be the best thing since sliced bread if they do it correctly, and they stay objective. I think one of the fears I have is that it ultimately will be weaponized. And as I was on my way home, I was thinking about, what's the ultimate goal here? The ultimate goal is to cut federal spending. So does that mean they're going to recommend a balanced budget? Is that part of what they're going to do? Or are they just going to, do they get the budgets from the departments and they have the final say on what goes before the president? Like, I was kind of thinking through, what does the process look like in terms of government efficiency and cutting spending? And how do you insert this into that?
Yeah, so I don't think they've defined it well enough, but kind of what you and I were talking about earlier, there's Congress people who are attached, or who are attaching themselves to that office, because the issue is, theoretically, it gets really messy if Vivek and Elon have authority, right? If they in effect are arguably employees of the federal government, as opposed to just, it's just like JR calling up Trump and saying, you should cut X, Y, and Z. I don't think JR has as much pull myself, but it might pop the case. But the issue is, if they have, if they really have real power, then that's an issue. It's an issue in multiple ways. One, it's an issue, and kind of what JR was saying, is there a conflict of interest? Because if they, the one I think of, let's say it's NASA, and Elon has SpaceX, and maybe doesn't want NASA as competition.
Well, he's got. I vaguely remember reading this the other day, but there's over 300. He's got over 300 defense contracts.
Yeah,
so
that's a separate. That's a separate issue. But what I'm saying is, NASA is a direct competitor to SpaceX. Maybe he might not think that. He might think they're way behind his technology. But let's say he doesn't want them to compete. So how about if he cuts them so they can't really do what they need to do to compete?
Well, I'm going to take the counter argument to that. I'm going to take the counter argument to that, because I remember when, they made the announcement under the Obama administration that NASA, where they were privatizing basically space flight, and I think Buzz Aldrin, or one of the astronauts from the moon landing,
Buzz Lightyear.
Buzz Lightyear, that's it. Buzz Lightyear and Woody came out, and basically said, "Look, this breaks my heart. The government needs to be involved." And I remember at the time reading, and the narrative was, private industry is going to fail. They're going to blow up, kill people, because the standards are going to be reduced. And that's really not at all what happened. In fact, what we've seen is significant advancement. I mean, I was just looking at a picture today that showed the rocket size that Musk just launched versus what they were launching 40 years ago. And it's incredible. I mean, the technology and what he's doing from space exploration standpoint is just mind-boggling.
No question.
So I tend to think that privatizing the space exploration, it has been quite successful.
It might be, but then you go to the second part of what you were saying. How about all the government contracts? So what happens if one of those is like a space contract? Isn't that like a super conflict of interest? And really, should he be involved in a contract that might involve
Well,
SpaceX?
this is where a bit of honor comes in. He should be recusing himself from any department oversight. Again, air quotes around oversight. Any department that he has direct contracts with. If it's going to be fair and balanced, he should not be privy to that information and be involved. But then that goes back to what, kind of what we started this conversation with. What is this thing going to look like, and what kind of authority are they going to have? We
And
know, I think, and I go back to what I said earlier, it's easier to talk about what we know it's not going to be. We know it's not going to be a federal agency because the amount of legislation and dollars and spending, I mean, they're the Department of Government Efficiency, but you're going to have to spend money to gear this thing up if it's considered an agency. And then it's under the guise of all the administrative agency rules that you and I know so well.
don't mention it.
So we know it's not going to be that.
Of course, I disagree, because my position is, just because you call it not an agency, it's like, that's the name of it. The not an agency. Look this way.
It's like a Naked Gun 2.5 movie.
Yeah, basically. I mean, just because they say exactly, it's the pilot. It's Kareem as the pilot. Yeah, I think they did everything they can, just like the kind of what we were talking about. It's called the department, but the Congress people used a different name because they realize that's kind of cheesy there. Do these guys, again, it gets back to the point. And again, because in my mind, it does not make a difference whether it's, this is my view. It doesn't make a difference whether it's positive or negative. To me, the issue is whether you're doing it properly. And in this case, I really think you could do it properly, but you can't be in a hurry. And I did a live stream with, I was on a Tesla live stream, and this was the whole topic, because Elon's involved, and the topic then was how that might impact his companies. That was the subject matter. And my basic proposition is, they're going to do whatever they want to do. For 4 years, if they want to fire everybody, they will fire everybody. And that will be it. Now, what will happen is there will be a bunch of litigation that will arise. For example, for example, maybe NASA will end up suing Musk over, limitations that are imposed upon them. Certainly there may be employees directly that might sue the.
Oh, let's go back to that a second, because so
no immunity, right? No immunity.
The agency's going to sue Musk. Agency reports to Trump. How is this going to work? You know what I mean?
It's most likely an employee.
Right.
Yeah. It's going to be somebody who's not connected to the federal government that files a claim. And again, the kind of way the way I saw it, let's say day one, what's January 20th, I think is day one. Let's say day one, I get fired from my job at NASA. I'm really pissed. I find a lawyer. Do you think you'd be able to find a lawyer?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I find a lawyer, and
they're gonna be fucking lining up.
I know. I find a lawyer, and yada yada yada, and then 60 days later, a complaint is filed, and alleging that there was some shenanigans going on with the termination. It was a conflict of interest, whatever. And we haven't gotten to the constitutional looper. We're getting to get to the constitutional issues. Then that case has to play out. So how long does it take for that case to go to trial? Because it's going to go to trial. Nobody's going to settle that. It's not. Well, I guess you could settle it. You could pay it off, but that means if you're gonna have to pay everybody who's fired. If you pay one, you're gonna have to pay them all. So I don't think you're easily gonna settle those cases. I think more likely, if you settle it, you're going to do it with a non-disclosure confidentiality agreement, or you're going to take it to trial and you're going to run it. And what's going to happen is, so that'll be 1 to 2 years. So we're 2 years in. If whoever loses that, and I think it's most likely, it's probably the private person who's most likely to lose at a trial level. It'll go up on appeal. It'll take a year. Could take longer, as we've seen in Alpine, right? By the way, I checked before we started. Nothing. Just still going. Just whatever. Appeal takes you into year 3, maybe all the way into year 4. Depending on the outcome, I think the individual again is going to lose again. I think
Right.
this is a decision that's going to have to be made by the Supreme Court. By the time it gets to the Supreme Court, Trump's term will be over. All these guys will be long gone from government, and in effect, whatever the shortcomings are, there will be no way of really undoing it. The only thing that you might be able to establish is that you can't do it this way, for future. And maybe there's damages that they're awarded for, being out of work, or in the private sector, if someone's wrongfully terminated and they can go back, they can get their job back. So, right. But in this case, if they, you could shut down the agency. It's okay.
You have to make a distinction between the civil service employees and the non-civil service employees.
Correct. Right. Because a lot of them are private employees.
Right.
Yeah. So, part of in the discussion about how they, being mostly Vivek and Elon, how they justify it, they relied upon, and they cited, to me it's funny, but in a PR, they cited Looper and they cited Jarkesy for the ability to do what they're doing. So
wait, I missed that. I'm sorry. I was reading a comment. So give me that again.
The two principals, Elon and Vivek, I think he put out, not Elon, he put out basically a legal analysis. I don't know if he's a lawyer. He may be a lawyer also. I don't know. He put out some kind of legal analysis, or at least, a brief analysis. And he relied upon Looper and Jarkesy, both cases, for the proposition that they could do what they're doing. The non-regulatory, regulatory. And I think their point was that after those cases, the regulatory bodies have less power, and because of that, they could do what they want to do. Well, what's your take on that?
So Loper, yes, 100%.
And tell me why. Tell me why.
Well, because of what Loper does. Loper changes the analysis that an Article 3 court does when reviewing an agency decision. We have talked about this at length. Loper gives the power back to the authority, back to the district court judge to look at the agency decision and say, I don't care if it's reasonable. I want to gather all the evidence and review the decision.
All right, so I'm going to stop you. I agree with that, but it doesn't give it to a third party. It doesn't give authority to somebody else. It just gives it back to the courts, right? So the courts now can make a determination based upon the evidence that's submitted without giving any presumption of. So in other words, right now, if you had a case, like if you sued some Department of Urban and Development, if it still exists, and you were in trial and you sued them for some practice that they had used, and you went to court and the agency said, we do this because we think it's a good practice and it's beneficial to the world. The judge would say, okay, plaintiff, the party suing, you lose. That's the case. From this point forward, even though the agency now has some logic about why they do it, the court does not have to accept that and could ask you, the private individual, what's your thinking about this? And then instead of having to just always the agency prevailing, now the private individual obviously is going to prevail a decent amount of the time, and probably it will impact the way the agencies conduct their business, because now
it absolutely is good. It absolutely is going to conduct the way agencies, because the analysis a court does is no longer based on reasonableness. It's not based on anything. But as you and I have talked about, this is going to be one of those. There's going to be one or two cases that are going to work their way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to have to redo the analysis to give judges guidance on how to move through these types of issues. Right now, there was no real guidance in Loper. Loper basically said Chevron's gone, the authority goes back to Article 3 courts, which is fine. but there's no guidance in Loper for a judge to kind of follow with, okay, well, what am I doing? I know I'm not giving the agency deference, but am I ending, plaintiff puts on their case, defendant puts on their case, I'm just making that decision, basically pulling it out of my ass. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Supreme Court will provide some level of, here's what you need to look for when reviewing the agency decision, whether it's reasonable or not.
Yeah, because the next step would be, and I don't know if this is going to go, the next step would be, could the agency completely, so on the old rules, the judge basically had to just accept whatever the agency said.
Right.
Will the courts now have the ability to completely reject the agency arguments? So not only give it like because what you were saying is like in a normal case, plaintiff puts on their case, the other side puts on the case, the judge looks, who wins? Who has 51% of the evidence? Who prevails? Right. So is that going to be the new standard? And I would say, until told otherwise, yeah, that would probably be
it has to be.
That would be the standard. But there probably will be cases where perhaps maybe the agency was egregious in their actions.
Well, sure.
And then there might be like cases where, can you throw out completely? Can you ignore the arguments of the agency? Which means now that the only evidence that would be coming in would be from the plaintiff, and the agency would lose. And that would be kind of like on the opposite end of how it was, where you'd have to just accept what the agency had. So what JR is saying is, there's probably going to be like little adjustments to that general rule that gives not just the courts, but everybody guidance as to what to do. But my point is that they were using, in their analysis, they were using the Looper to support the fact that they could operate a non-agency agency.
Yeah, I don't know how they're doing that.
I don't follow that.
Well, I've read Loper 3 times, and I don't think there's anything in Loper that makes that suggestion, or anything by any judge that you could pull that out and basically use it as a basis to create something like Doge. I don't know how they're doing that. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't think it follows.
What is the connection?
Yeah, I don't think it follows. And maybe they are making, I understand how and it's true that regulatory bodies have been weakened. This stuff obviously takes away authority, but I think the mistake is they claim the authority goes to them, not to the courts. And right. So what I guess the argument would be, it would be appropriate for the courts to decide the firings,
the other thing, they need to be careful, because again, based on how this thing is structured, they can find themselves subject to Loper.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
That's the kind of thing. So, one of the issues is, and we'll talk about Jarkesy in a second, but one of the issues is, this is when we were talking about authority. If it's an agency, it can't be created by the president. It has to be created by Congress, and it has to, the time it's in existence has to be defined, what it does, the scope of what it does, and how it does it has to be defined, and that's it. And the president would get to select who ran that particular agency. That would be his way of controlling what was going on. But they're not doing that. I think they could do that, by the way. That's my concern.
Well, I think they could too. They certainly have the votes. The Republicans control Congress, so
they could. But this might be. I was thinking about why they don't do it. Because there's a somebody's going to have to get confirmed as the head of the agency, and then there's probably going to be somebody on the other side of the aisle who's not going to be happy. And I don't know if this is one of those bills or one of these. Yeah, I guess one of these things that is going to permit a filibuster. And maybe that's ultimately the issue, because if you require 60 votes in the Senate to get this through, maybe you could do it eventually. You do it by giving away things. You can negotiate it, but it might take a while. And I think it's a question of expediency. Because again, in my mind, they're going to do it no matter what. It's not like they're not going to do it. And by the time the issue comes back, they're all going to be gone. So I happen to think that's the approach they're going to take. What were you going to say?
I think so too, because it doesn't make sense. You're creating a department of government efficiency by creating yet another agency. That's not that defies the intent. So I personally don't think it's going to be a government agency. I think, I read an article, I've read two articles that actually said they were talking about how it's going to be a department under the White House. Okay,
Yeah.
so what's it going to look like? Then the next question is,
I think they were.
what's the authority?
I think they were referring to the basement.
Subfloor under the West Wing.
Yeah, it was under the White House. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't really trust the label because you're not going to say, like, again, this is not really an agency. Agency is the name of the non-agency. They're not going to like give it away. Another thing I was thinking about, we were talking about Doge, and then we'll talk about Jarkesy because that obviously comes up. Let's actually talk about Jarkesy. So they cited Jarkesy. What do you think about that as a citation on that? So that's Elon and partner citing Jarkesy in support of them doing things the way that they're going to do it.
So what do we know about what Jarkesy did, right? We talked about Jarkesy at length. We live streamed during their oral arguments. Jarkesy was limited to 10b5 SEC claims, right? It was very narrowly construed to basically say, if the SEC is charging someone with a 10b5 fraud claim in which they were attempting to get civil penalties, so dollars, from the defendant had a right to a jury trial. Not right, he had to have a jury trial. The option.
Well, no, I think he could turn it down.
He could turn it down.
Yeah.
And the reason they were doing that is because the SEC was picking and choosing when they wanted to go to an administrative law judge versus when they wanted to go into federal court. They had no rhyme or reason. The case even said that. So that's my understanding of the central holding of Jarkesy.
Yeah, I think.
I don't. What are they using for the basis to say Jarkesy gives them the authority to do this?
I guess because it restricted the authority. I think again they're taking the position that restricting the authority of the agencies somehow gives them authority to do the way they're talking about. I think Jarkesy specifically was whenever I'm going to narrow the holding or widen it. I don't know which way. It was if there is a claim for money damages, a common law claim for money damages. That means a claim that you could have brought 100 and 200 years ago in England, basically, for money damages, that you had a Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial, and that the regulatory agencies couldn't take that away from you. And part of the problem, of course, as we've experienced, is those regulatory agencies conducting their proceedings, even though they have to comply with the APA, is that what it's called? Even though they have to comply with the APA, they often don't provide really good results for consumers, as we've experienced personally. Right. And so the idea is, and I don't know if this necessarily follows either, but theoretically, if you're in front of a judge, you have a better, you'll get better due process than if you're before some clown or group of clowns who are being paid or not being paid by FINRA, as it turns out, and they're deciding it because it's a public service.
Right.
By the way, because that's what FINRA does. What FINRA does is an arbitration. For example, and that's one of the agencies that we would be talking about. Or it's really an SRO, but for the purposes of that, they control obviously all the arbitrations that people are involved with, and they don't really give you a lot of opportunity unless you have a fully, if your case is ready to go. In other words, if it's one of those cases where you have all the evidence and you don't have to rely upon anybody else, then you probably have a chance of winning.
Right.
Okay. If it's a normal case where you have to get evidence to bolster your position, which is most cases, then they don't permit you to do that. And that's, I think that's purely intentional. So that being the case, they cited that case, Jarkesy, and the Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial for in support of their position to it sounds like somebody didn't maybe read the full case. You know,
Look, I tend to think these guys are smarter than me, but I'm not seeing
they are. No, oh, they're definitely smarter than you. That's the case. You know, but you know, I think they're using the position that because the courts have restricted the agency's ability or power, that somehow that gives them the power. And I was going to say, you know, part of the problem is about this agency, non-agency. So how could they do it? We just said they could set up, they could Congress, because they will have a majority in Congress. Congress can set up the agency, the person get confirmed. They could go and they could be advisors to the agency, Elon and Vivek. They could be advisors to the agency could go do its thing, and okay, we're good. The problem is there'll be a delay. That's the problem. There'll be a delay in that process. Might take 6 months. I don't know. But the Trump promised that he'd do this right away. So I think he's compelled to do it right away, notwithstanding that. So the issue is that why is that bad if the president didn't, because I think in effect they have authority. It's not like they don't have authority. So I this is my personal view. I believe that they actually are acting as a regulatory body, even notwithstanding whatever they call themselves.
Right.
So what's the problem with it? The problem is that that's a violation of the separation of powers in the Constitution. And I think, in other words, again, the president's not supposed to set up the agency. The president's just supposed to appoint the person running the agency, appoint people to be ambassador, all that kind of stuff. Not that. And that's a basic constitutional provision. And I think if you took it out, now again, I think it's meaningless in large sense, because I don't think a case is going to get to the Supreme Court in time. I don't think it's going to get there. But I think if this court, the current court, which is conservative, but if this court got that issue and there wasn't the adherence to the argument is going to be, they're going to argue what we're talking about. Is this right. Agency, not agency? And, the argument will go. And it's I think it's an important issue because it's the first time it's ever going to be done. And so is this going to be is this going to be part of future government, or is this a one-time deal?
I was just going to say, I'm sure it's not the first time some type of department has been created under the guise of the White House. I think the first time
you just called it the department again.
Did it? No. I think this will be the first time with the level the level of authority this thing is going to have. What's the level of authority they're going to have? And I go back to that question we first talked about. Are they going to review the budget? Are they going to make budget recommendations? Does the budget come in and they go, no, we're not spending $2 million on bees mating habits? Or
it does.
No,
yeah, somebody's saying it has an end date July 4th, 2025, and that correlates.
That's Wall Street Ponzi. Don't pay attention.
No, there is actually.
I don't know.
No, in the proposal there was an end date, 18 months from the start, and it's considered it's before the next congressional election, so it might be timely.
But still, go back to that basic question: what's the level of authority this thing is going to have, this entity is going to have? Because that's where the lawsuits are going to start flying.
Yes,
that's really where the lawsuits are going to start flying. But it's going to be based on the authority and the power that they have, and what does that authority and power look like?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to hit 100,000. By the way,
no, I just looked. We're at 98.2.
283. Yeah, it's kind of sad. I blame you. JR is like keeping it down.
Yeah.
I don't know if. This is certainly not financial advice. This is just kind of the irony. Is I was speaking to JR this morning, and I have. So I did clearly not financial advice.
Why are you doing it to yourself?
I know, as the person speaking, clearly has no idea what he's doing. But I, as a hedge, kind of election. I thought the election was going to go a particular way, and I thought Bitcoin would be a beneficiary of that. So I bought a bunch of MicroStrategy, which is a company that accumulates Bitcoin. I don't think it has any other business, but it's also now able to accumulate Bitcoin, borrowing money at 0%. I don't know how that's done. I mean, you got to pay it back, but it's 0%. So there's not a big, it's pretty leveraged, I would say. So I bought it at not long ago. I mean, like 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Bought it at 130 overnight last night. And so Bitcoin obviously has gone well because people expect that crypto is going to be endorsed by the White House because they've indicated that. The person who's going to run the SEC, Gary Gensler did announce today that he's resigning the 20th of January next year. There was an attorney candidate that was proposed to run the SEC, and she represented crypto companies. So it's perceived, if she in fact is and she's an attorney, if in fact she's the appointment, that it would be pro crypto. So kind of I speculated that was the way it's going to go. MicroStrategy was overnight. It moves crazily because of the way I described. I don't know what it is. It just collects Bitcoin, and it's leveraging the Bitcoin. So overnight.
Did you just say you don't know what it is?
No, I know what it is. But I've heard other people who own it, and they say, "What's the business?" The business is you got a big asset, that's for sure, and it's going to be an accruing asset, and maybe you'll be able to use that asset to buy something else.
Oh God, Wall Street. That name brings back memories, man.
Yeah, I do. Anyway, so I last night it went from about 470 overnight, 470 to 545. When I woke up this morning, I'm on the West Coast. So I was up before 6, sold a little bit, and I've sold a little bit over time as it's gone up. I sold a little bit at 544, not the time, the price. And by 90 minutes later, the stock was down about $70, and it went from 544 after hours down to 380 in one day. And one thing that was, which is incredible, and I got out at some point in time, although I bought something else to kind of hedge going back up. So because I did very well on that stock. But what helped cause that move, besides the fact people have the same conversation we just had, and when it started to move down, people probably that conversation became more real, was Citron filed a short report today on them. And they probably made a boatload of money. If we could see it, right, from 540 down to 380, guarantee you the guys were shorting it down. They made a boatload going down.
Sure, they took a short position and then they put their publication out.
Yeah. Or they already had a short position. Yeah, they might have already had short position. But you can imagine they rode that sucker down, made a ton of money, and probably if after hours it went back up like 5%, they probably got out, I guess.
Right.
They maybe got out, then there was no more, selling pressure, and the price went up like 20 or 30 bucks, I think. But anyway, it was kind of interesting to me because that thing moved like a whipsaw, and that's kind of I guess a designated Bitcoin. If you're not going to trade Bitcoin, that's one thing you can do. There's a bunch of ETFs that you can join, like iBit, which is a BlackRock ETF. Right. And there's a bunch of leveraged ones. It's interesting. It'd be interesting to see if how long this goes on, what happens at the end. Usually these have a conclusion. Up till now, Bitcoin lasts like a year. That's kind of the cycle, and then it kind of goes cool. But this is the first time where there's been, and your state is doing it. This is the first time where there's actually been active discussion about making Bitcoin as a reserve currency
Right.
or reserve something. I know the state of Pennsylvania is doing it. They announced that today. And apparently there's a bill in Congress offered by Senator Loomis, Susan Loomis, I think. And that's going to be to have Bitcoin as a reserve for the United States, up to Bitcoin's a fixed number of coins. There's 21 million coins. So it would be 5%. I think they said 1 million coins. Right now, they apparently have that they've acquired from, either, illegal activity, there's a drug raid, they get a bunch of Bitcoin. So they have like 200,000 coins, 250,000 coins already. That's in the coffers. And I think they want to add to it to get a 1 million. I know China's doing it. So it'd be interesting to see if that happens, if it's going to cause a spike in the price or not.
Right.
Because unlike the prior cycles, there is like a demand issue. But you wonder if there's a demand issue and the prices go so high, does that then now reduce volatility? Because now, I mean, can you afford like $100,000 to buy a Bitcoin is not chump change. That excludes probably most people. So it's institutions, it's fine, but it probably excludes retail. And if the price goes up, then it excludes more people. So you wonder then, will you have the same kind of volatility? And I would think not.
I don't know enough about it. I really don't.
I don't either, but I'm still talking about it.
I shared my story with you that I remember reading it when it was like $100 and be like, this shit's garbage.
Yeah.
I just don't know enough about it. So
all I know is it moved like $150 today, and that was pretty amazing. I thought that reminded me of once I had I ever tell you about this? Lucid.
Well, it just moved $416.
Yeah, it's like it went back up. I mean, it like I said, probably the shorts sold out, and the selling pressure probably took off, and it popped back up a little bit. I learned I had Lucid. You know Lucid Motors? It's an EV company, very elegant, but they produce like 7 cars. That's about what they do. And they were promising all kinds of stuff, and I bought it. It was a SPAC. Do you remember those SPAC? The SPAC time?
Yeah,
those. So the SPACs were instead of the IPOs, and the company doesn't quite get as much money. It's a little differently. There's a third party that really makes a nice chunk of change. They're kind of bring the deal to the table, and then the company
always a third party.
Yeah, and then but it's different than like in a normal, like where let's say Goldman Sachs is doing some kind of offering for somebody. They take their cut, but these guys are like a partner in this deal, not like taking a cut. And they only make money if the deal goes forward. So their interest is making these SPACs go forward to go public. So I bought in on Lucid. It was probably $18-20, something like that, and it went to 65. I was sitting in my office. I couldn't trade at that time. I couldn't trade. I didn't have an account where I could trade after hours, and at 65, I thought I was going to like 800 at that point in time, maybe 850. I'm watching it after hours one day, and it goes down to like, I don't know, 20, 22. All my money left, just one afternoon, and there was nothing I could do about it. I was like completely frozen out. So anyway, that was a pretty dramatic move, and like all these kind of like, listen, Bitcoin is a risky asset, right? So MicroStrategy is like leveraged Bitcoin. Just to think about that, and then just to let you know, there's a leveraged version of MicroStrategy. So you could buy that. So you're probably like, 4 or 5 times Bitcoin theoretically.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Thanks, Forrest.
You're welcome. Anything else you wanted to talk about? Oh, we want to talk about the new AG or AG candidate.
Oh, Getz, yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead?
No, I said to someone the other day that I did not, when Getz was first announced and he resigned within, 15 hours or whatever it was, I did not think he was going to get the nominate or get confirmed. And I was convinced that he was a sacrificial lamb in some way. That, you know, the Trump folks knew, look, if we nominate Getz, we know he's not going to get confirmed, but we really want, this guy back here to get confirmed. So we'll use Getz as leverage. And then, the news came out that he had resigned from Congress. The reason he did that was so that the report didn't come out. And then it was like, okay, well, maybe that's why they nominated him, because they knew the ethics report was going to come out. So they nominated him. He resigned from Congress to kind of keep all that behind closed doors. And then, today he resigned or not, he didn't resign. He was withdrawn, or Trump's, nixed him, and I thought, okay, well, that none of that made sense. And then the more I kind of thought through was, the possibility of, they knew the report was going to come out. He resigned. They nominated him. He became a sacrificial lamb. The report was still going to come out. And they said, look, you're done. Get away from us. We don't want to be any part of you. So I just I don't know what happened, like in terms of, I mean, I can speculate what happened, but at the end of the day, I don't think he was ever going to get the confirmation. I think the Trump folks knew that.
Yeah, I think
that's personal opinion of mine.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but I know that sometimes it's perceived that they will throw out some candidates that they know will not get confirmed again, because they can use that as a bargaining chip. They could say, well, okay, well, he's going to drop out and you confirm X, and that may well be the case, or else he's just a scumbag. Alternatively, it may be like he's just not going to get confirmed. There's going to be I think it's four. If four Republicans vote against him, he won't get confirmed. I think it's 53, 47. So it may be the case they found 4 or 5 that were just not going to accept it. And it's not like you can't find better candidates, right? Because I think they did find a better candidate, didn't they? Didn't they?
It was like 10, 20 minutes before we started. It was the former, was an attorney out of Florida.
Attorney General out of Florida.
Out of Florida, yes.
Yeah. And she probably have a much easier chance of getting confirmed. I would think. I was, to me, like I don't think he was suited for the role. Let me say that generously. And not to say that he's probably going to be, I think you said it too. He's probably going to be involved in the White House in some other role, some other aspect. I figured the three people that I thought they were going to have the toughest time getting confirmed were him, Tulsi Gabbard. I think they may have a tough time, and RFK. Those three I thought would be the 3 toughest myself. But they don't have to worry about this guy. I know they're announcing all kinds of candidates. I think now that Gensler has announced that he's stepping down, that I assume he'll announce who the SEC person's going to be. Maybe when that's formally announced, that will impact the crypto market also, if that person really is. But I don't know, maybe that's already baked into the equation. Because again, usually my experience is when I start talking about something, I'm not the first guy to know. Right?
Whenever I hear that phrase, there's a meme out there where there's 2 dinosaurs and there's a big ass asteroid in the background that's on fire. And the one dinosaur is looking at the other going, don't worry, it's priced in.
Well, the way the way I figure, that's funny. The way I figure is like anything that's printed is available to the algorithms, and they'll be able to pick that up and analyze it and make a decision long before I will ever, even if it's like 5 seconds before I discover it. That's too late. That's way too late.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not able to take advantage of something like that unless you know it before it's publicized.
Or sometimes like there was there was a a company that bought. So MicroStrategies is that buys Bitcoin. There was another company that did it. They announced it this week. It's called Semler Scientific. I don't remember the initials, but they announced it on Tuesday, I think. And they went. Let me see what they are today. They are at 66. I believe on Tuesday, they were in the 30s.
Wow.
Yeah, so they were up 100% just because they said they were going to allocate. I don't even think it was like a significant amount, but just that they were going to allocate. And I know Microsoft has a proposal, a shareholder proposal before them, because Microsoft doesn't want to do it. But apparently one of their shareholders who has a good amount of shares is letting Saylor do a presentation at their annual meeting for them to buy Bitcoin as a reserve. Because the only thing they do with their money at this point in time is they buy back shares. And his position is the return on Bitcoin to the company is much higher than just buying back shares like that. Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I don't know, again, nobody really knows what the impact will be, or if there's going to be an impact, or if this is already, again, we don't know when these things are already factored in. This all could be like we're talking about something that's 6 months old already,
Right.
in the equation. Anyway, but I think it will be interesting to see how the cabinet turns out. It's certainly the nominating process is going at a fast pace.
Yeah,
I hope, because that pisses me off, by the way. It happens every administration, almost every administration. If the houses line up, they jerk around about confirming judges, confirming people, and all it does, and that's all political, in my opinion, it's all political nonsense. And all it does is waste money, time, effort, and it wastes results. And I don't really care, by the way, whatever. We want good results. Everybody wants good results. Nobody does, nothing good happens if we all suck, if it ends up like that way. Anything else you want to add besides any comments that caught your name? Oh, so I see, not Terry. Yeah, it was interesting though that the stock moved. I was watching that. I'm in Mara also, because Mara's did the same thing. Mara's a Bitcoin miner, but what they did is they raised $1 billion, I think. Yeah, I think it's $1 billion to buy Bitcoin. So they are following the MicroStrategy rule. They're up about. I bought it this week. It was less than this. It was in the 19s. I bought it right at 20, and it's up about 20. It's at 25, slightly over 25. So whatever that is, 25% in a couple days. That's
right.
Just on the Bitcoin purchase.
Right.
Because again, that might be fleeting, that might be nonsense, but the Semler one was interesting just because of the stock move. I think it's a smaller market cap, probably a smaller float, and a lot of money. I mean, not a huge amount of money might be able to move things quickly, but that's a big move.
It's still down. I think every time you say Bitcoin, it goes down like 10 cents.
Bitcoin. Did it drop?
I'd have died if it went down 40 cents.
Yeah, 40 cents. All right. Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting how it's going to play out, because you really have support. And is that meaningful, or is it all baked in already? And it's going to be like, how many times have you thought something was going to go a particular way and you were really confident in it, and it ended up the exact opposite? I mean, it happens. It's,
Well, if I had a dime for every time I thought that.
Yeah, I know. You'd have like 30 cents by now.
I'd have like 30 cents.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add, by the way?
No, I just that I think this is all going to be very interesting to watch play out. Yeah. I'm excited for the new administration. I know you and I have talked at length on kind of the differences, but I'm excited. I want to see what happens, what he does. That's why I voted for him. I voted for change. As you know, you and I have talked about this many times. only voted for 2 Republicans in my life. This is the second one, and I'm more excited about this vote than I was when I voted for Bush in '04. So I'm can't wait to see how it kind of all plays out.
Well, I'm interested in how the cabinet part works out, how the Doge, uh, all it'd be interesting to see if Dogecoin moves with Doge, just because Elon and
Right.
Doge, and it wouldn't shock me. It's a meme. Is it going to shock you? And I know like Trump has supposedly a coin also, so I don't know. And I heard today that perhaps they're trying to get some kind of financial service company hooked into DJT so that they will have some kind of payment processing thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I didn't I saw something like that a couple days ago, but I didn't I'm not in DJT, and I won't be. I have no desire to go in it, but I saw that and didn't just read the glimpse and kind of moved on from it. So I don't really know.
Yeah, there was a rumor they're acquiring some kind of crypto exchange, Backed, I think it's called. And although it hasn't, they haven't, I don't think they've acknowledged it. The Backed, I think it's called Backed. It went up quite a bit on the news. DJT is whatever. I think it's like 30, 32, somewhere in there.
Right.
It's kind of like parked itself. I think Trump said he announced that he's not selling. At least I saw that not that long ago. Because I think his lockup period expired, and probably until it has a bigger value, it's probably not worth it to him. I'm sure he didn't pay anything, right? He couldn't have paid anything for those shares, right?
Well, no, I don't think he paid anything for them, but I agree with you. I don't think he's going to sell until there's more value.
And I don't
So
know if there's any value to DJT. I don't know if it does anything. It's a. Have you ever been on that
Truth
on the
Social?
platform?
No, I've not.
Yeah, I've never been on it. I don't think it's like a huge platform. I don't think it's competing with X, for example. I
No,
think I, I
I
think
don't.
that's kind of, which is kind of interesting. If Trump set up a platform that competed with X in light of his relationship with Elon, that'd be interesting to see if that put a snarl on it. It's also interesting to see to me because apparently I've heard this. I don't know if it's true, but there's been discussion that there are people a little bit jealous of the relationship that Trump and Elon have developed at Mar-a-Lago, and apparently Elon is now like a resident of Mar-a-Lago. So it wouldn't shock me though at some point in time if Elon is too much for Trump, and Trump, as
Really?
opposed to Trump being his best buddy, it would not shock me if at some point in time they have a falling out and they go their different ways. Elon, I think apparently if you look at some of his interviews in the past, he was at times certainly no big supporter.
See, I'm going to go the opposite because I've been thinking, and I read, there was some tinfoil on X about this, but I think I would not be surprised if somehow you don't see some type of merger between Truth Social and X. That's what I'm going on. That's what I have floating around in my head. How are they going to spin this? Because I tend to think that Trump would love nothing more than to own X.
Oh, maybe, but I don't think Elon would like to not own X.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
He spent a lot of money on that thing, and financially it was a bad buy, but he
Yeah,
does it. At least he states he does it, as a First Amendment, or he open. That's his logic. So
I get it. I get
if
it.
it's not money, then there's why else would he be operating it if that other reason is not the reason. Although I don't agree with a lot of his choices, by the way, what he would find acceptable or not. But it would be interesting to see if at some point in time they had a falling out. The last thing I should have mentioned this. What's interesting to me also is Tesla. So Tesla comes into the equation. So Tesla is working on two things that are kind of outside of what the car part. They're working on robotics I Optimus, which is a robot, which I guess is not that far off, but we don't know. And then full self-driving. Now, full self-driving is really an interesting issue because states can have different rules than the federal government. So if a state, if California doesn't want to permit, full self-driving, arguably they could just say no. We're not going to permit it in the state. And that's kind of consistent with what the next administration would say, because they don't want they want states to have the right to have power, not the federal government. But what I was thinking about would be interesting is, since Elon's going to be involved, if they could make some kind of claim about federal preemption, that they will set the standards for full self-driving because it's so important. It's an item of health and safety, etc., and that their law will take precedence over any state's law, and if they could usurp the power of the states to prohibit full self-driving when the federal government allows it. I think that would be interesting if that happened. And again, it would be kind of, not that it stops anybody from doing anything that's inconsistent, but it would be like completely inconsistent with states' rights, in my opinion. But I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't like a bone that's thrown out, because for Tesla, what is perceived as the real future value, because the number of cars that they're selling, basically nobody else in the United States is selling electric cars. That's what it comes down to. And demand is kind of slowed, and their profit margins have decreased because they've had a lower prices and because all the reasons. So the car part of it has slowed down as being a profit source. But energy has improved because they do a lot of energy. And what really they believe is the future value is full self-driving and Optimus. So to me, it would be interesting if the plan, if like the chess move is ultimately he's here to run Doge, the thing, but really what he wants to do is be able to get the regulations kind of contrary, but to get the regulations in place to permit full self-driving. That's my kind of thesis of one of the driving elements. And again, you could, in the law or the regulations, it could be either one. It could be federal regulations or law. You could try to usurp the state's rights, and there may be litigation about that, of course, also. Whether
there's going to be litigation, since it's a promulgated rule by the agency. What's going to be the controlling case law?
Right, but it would be interesting to see. Again, it could really expedite for Tesla their ability to get it started and to generate revenue, etc. And he's in the perfect position to influence that with his non-agency and his position in the administration. Again, it's be interesting to see how much I'm going to call it. I was going to say corruption. How much politics?
I think politics is the more appropriate word. I hate to presuppose there's going to be corruption. I again, maybe I'm being naive, but I'm hoping that they do this right, and it does what it's supposed to do, which is fix some of the problems we have with bloated government. So, there's no. Go ahead.
I was going to say the issue, of course, is when we get rid of all these people, they'll get severance. They don't make as much as in the private sector. I think generally that's the case. But you have a bunch of people that be unemployed too, right? And you have to find, which is kind of the same thing as the issue with the robotics. All these issues is you're kind of getting rid of labor, and you have to find a different place for that labor to go. Does that mean retrain, in new industries? I hope so. I would say, I think like the UAW, United Auto Workers, those unions, that part of their of what they bring should be training their employees in new industries, not in the old stuff.
Well, look, and I don't know if this got resolved, but we still have the port strike issue coming up here in January. They held off.
That's true.
They pulled the strike back and went back to work, 12 hours later. So that issue's still hanging out there.
Yeah, I don't know what Trump's relationship is with the is it Teamsters? Is it
I
the
don't I don't
dock
remember
workers?
what union it is.
I
I
don't
think it's
remember.
IBEW,
Okay. All right.
but I could be wrong.
You say so. If you say they're protected by the APA, right?
No.
Okay.
National Labor Relations Act.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he has maybe he has influence. Maybe they voted for him. I don't know. Because like the UAW, I know probably a lot of members didn't vote for him. But part of the reason why I think that, and this probably, I wonder if this is the difference in the election. Very well could have been. Part of the reason why Elon supported Trump is because, and I was following it very carefully, so I remember when after Biden took office, they had a summit at the White House for EVs, and they brought the leading leaders of the industry there, and Elon was not invited. And when Biden talked about Mary Barra, who's the head of GM, she was declared basically the king or queen of EVs. And in that year, my numbers might be off, but in that year, let's say Tesla had sold, I'm making up a number, let's say 1 million cars, it's probably more. And that year, GM had delivered, as of that point in time, literally like 29 electric vehicles. And from that day, Elon was pissed.
I'm sure he was.
And I think it's because of that slight that he decided, because he didn't vote for Trump the last time. At least that's what he says. I would think he's got enough sway of Tesla investors probably to make a difference in the election. If it was a close election, it may have made a difference. And this is a case where Biden probably, just by not being smart about it, may have cost himself the election, like on day one of his presidency.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I can't tell you how many times Elon Musk, leading up to the election, the last 2 weeks of the election, that Elon Musk was in Pennsylvania.
Oh, I know.
He was here at least 15 times.
I know.
I was fortunate enough to get selected twice to go see him. I couldn't go both times, but both times I registered, I got picked to go, and I had conflicts with the kids.
Yeah, it would not surprise me if he was responsible for 2 or 3 million votes, something like that.
I believe
it. And that very well could have been the difference. And again, it was just a terrible, amongst a lot of terrible maneuvers, just a terrible decision, because it was just poorly handled. And I think it
really was.
And I think it was, again, an allegiance to the UAW that, unfortunately, I think it supports a lot of political causes. So they spend a lot of money and they have a lot of influence. Unfortunately, and this turned out, it probably kicked them in the ass. Honestly,
yeah, he shot himself in the foot on day one. I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. All righty. Anything else?
No, I think it was a good discussion. It's going to be exciting to see how it all plays out, and we'll see what happens. I do agree with you. I think there's going to be lawsuits. There's definitely going to be lawsuits, but we'll see. It's not going to stop them. They're going to do what they want.
And again, we think that Alpine there's no decision in Alpine because we think they might be waiting for a decision in a Supreme Court case.
In another Supreme Court case. We think the judge might be waiting on a decision in another Supreme Court.
We don't, and it's sitting. And again, but that's a reason why sometimes I think everybody who's either personally experienced a legal proceeding or has watched legal proceedings, that there's no way to predict time. Mm-hmm. And it's very frustrating to most human beings, that factor. And legal goes on forever. And if there's a benefit and I'm saying, that's not that it can't end in a positive way, but if you're trying to delay and you have the money, you can delay. Kind of it. All right, go to sleep, JR. Anyway, to all you guys out there for hanging out with us, we appreciate it. We will post this, and if you have any questions that come up later on, please post them. Thanks again for hanging out. We will, when we have some new information, we will come back to you. And thanks, and have a great evening. You want anything to say, JR?
Nope. Everybody have a good night.
Yeah. Be well, everybody. Take care. And